Hi, I'm Rick.
Hi, I'm Oscar. Rick, you prepared something.
I did. I prepared something with Azure Functions and Open API Specification.
Okay, I'm really curious. Tell me the story around that.
Well, I think we all know and probably also love Open API Specification, where you can use, for instance, Swagger to have a UI that gives people an entire overview of your models, of your API and the actions that are there, and even give them possibilities to try it out. Now, there's been a long quest for Open API Specification in Azure Functions.
Yeah, because you can use that as an API. You can build some RESTful endpoint in there.
Yeah.
But indeed, like the Swagger as we know it, as we plug it into an ASP.NET stack, doesn't work there.
No, it doesn't. But first, I would like to say a few other things, because Azure Functions had Azure Functions Live a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And they had a lot of cool announcements to make. And then one of them is, as we already discussed, the fact that .NET 5 will be going RC soon. TM, because we never know when soon is really soon. But what's also really cool is the fact that Azure Static Web Apps, that I'm a big fan of Static Web Apps, that's also managed by the Functions team, since Functions are at the heart of APIs under Static Web Apps.
There are a lot of announcements around that, right? Because
Yeah.
I heard also questions about when can we expect this from Azure DevOps, or everyone is really curious about where this thing is going.
Totally true. And then they had a lot of things to say about that one. For instance, they have this routes.json file that you can use to have authentication on specific routes and not authentication on other ones. And that also always needed to be in the root of your static website location. And it worked from there, and it was called routes.json. But if you then have other types of config that you would like to keep in files under your static web app, you would have to have a different file.
Yeah, it was really single purpose. So
yeah, so they all put that into one file, which is now called Azure Web App.config.json. And one of the things in there is the ability to define the routes. It has a slightly new syntax for the routes. And
it's JSON, it's not YAML or anything.
No, it's well, the extension is .json, so I'm hoping it's JSON, right? So you can have new settings in there as well. But the cool thing about that one is you can place it anywhere in your application, and it will automatically pick it up because the name is so explicit.
No.
Because routes.json doesn't, it's not that really explicit, but the Azure Web App.config.json is very explicit, so you can put it anywhere in the Azure Static Web App and it will pick that up for the configuration. So I think that's a good thing. Another thing that's interesting on Azure Functions in general is that if you're running your functions in a premium plan, which I know some people do, and if you have a VNet around there, then you can now have private endpoints which are generally available.
That's GA now. Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen it, but it's GA.
It is now GA, so you can have HTTP triggered endpoints on your Azure Functions which are only available inside of your own VNet. So those are not internet facing. So as far as security goes, that's a very big plus, and that's now automatically managed for you with a GA version of private endpoints.
Cool. Doesn't mean you don't have to do anything further security-wise if they're private now, because they're still open in your organization if you don't do anything.
True.
It's a hard discussion sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine that one. And then what's also cool is that they now have versionless key vault integration and auto rotation.
Is this the key vault reference in the configuration, you mean?
Yeah, so you had to have that explicit version targeted, and then if you got a new version, you're going to get the new URI for the new version of the same. If you now don't give out a version, it will automatically always pick the latest.
That is like the reference it was doing in app configuration.
Yes, true.
Okay.
So if you do that, under the application configuration from the Azure Functions app.
Yeah, now straight away, because it was already there in the app configuration, like the tenant itself.
Yeah, true.
Does this also? Do you know if it also works in normal app service? So in Azure websites?
I think it already did over there, but I'm not entirely sure.
I think I still have all the versions in there in most applications.
That's actually a good one to look into. And then some general stuff about what's coming. So .NET 5 production is days away, as they said it. So maybe as soon as this is on YouTube, we'll already have it in RC at least. But then on a later moment, .NET 5 Visual Studio templates for Azure Functions will be coming in a new version of Visual Studio. So it's probably, as soon as you see that update coming on the bottom right corner of your Visual Studio, it might probably say, hey, we've got stuff.
And from that moment, we can just F5 those things
Yes.
while we're now still typing func host. Well, and there's nothing wrong with that because you can run from Visual Studio Code and all kinds of things. But I think a lot of people just do a file new project, follow the rules there, F5 it, and go.
See if it works.
And it's a perfect experience. So why not?
Yes, and I think that's one of the powers of Azure and all of the tools available around it. That it's the developer experience is awesome,
yeah.
Especially compared to other cloud providers, let's say. So there's a lot of extra stuff coming for static web apps.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, we're going to get application insights to be added semi-automatically instead of you having to add it manually.
Yeah.
And also they're working on a CLI, which we'll do a different topic on. So you'll have a static web app CLI.
Another CLI?
Wow. Everything CLIs. And we're finally going to get Apex domain support because that's currently not available. And they're actually saying we cannot have static web apps go GA without Apex domain support. So that's something that's coming too. And then the Azure DevOps that you already mentioned will be one of the things as well. Now, let's go to my desktop, and we have a terminal open right here, but I'm going to open up a new instance of Visual Studio. Oh no, let's go actual Visual Studio for this one. And then this is how they currently implemented the Open API specification on Azure Functions. And to be honest, I'm not really sure if I'm happy with this implementation. Since
that's a lot of stuff there.
There's a lot of stuff there, and now please remind you, I only have 2 of the Open API specification things in code. So normally there's a lot more of these. And in this case, I only have 2 because, for instance, authorization, I stripped that out since this function is authorization level anonymous. So they don't have to have an authorization thing for Open API specification. But here you can see that I actually need to explicitly set all of the details of this Azure function to enable to have an Open API specification.
Okay, but it is powerful because we can now have this close to your code where you will change things and generate spec. But on the other hand, some of these things can be inferred of the usage, I would say normally.
Now this is a NuGet package that's still very much in preview, so I can imagine that they will find a way to actually pull that out of...
Like a bit of a richer way to define this.
Yeah, so what I did right now is I have this Open API that has a get all for beta talks, and then I have this static list of the first 3 beta talks we ever did to be available there. And then we have a get one where you actually have an extra option on the Open API parameter where it says this is an ID parameter of type in, or sorry, the location is in the path. So if you have it in a query parameter, then you need to have that in query.
It's like the same thing you're doing in your route below there. It's like implying there's an ID, and then because you have that somewhere as a string, it will map it.
And then I think this is the downside. I had this line here with the Open API parameter set to parameter location.query, but it was actually in the path.
Part of the path, yeah.
That means the try it out now on the Swagger UI doesn't work. It breaks.
You have an incorrect specification or an incorrect implementation, depends on which one you think is correct.
And on one hand, that's a good thing, but on the other hand, why do I need to specify 2 times and make sure that those are the same? So I think there's some options to improve over there. But let's have a look at what we actually implemented, because we have the get all here that actually just returns all of the beta talks, which is, as we specified here in the Open API response with body, it's of type list beta talks entity. And then with the get one, we get the explicit one that has the ID that we get in. And then we can see if we can return that one, otherwise we'll do a bad request because then we weren't able to parse the ID that was on the path. So now if we run this, now something actually happens, that's, as far as I'm concerned, the biggest plus of this NuGet package.
Yeah.
Because I only have 2 functions in there, and I haven't added anything else except for the OpenAPI parameters or attributes. And then what happens is that you see they will have 4 extra endpoints, among which a Swagger UI endpoint for my OpenAPI specification that I have in my attributes. So if I take this URL and I go there, then I can see that I actually have the Swagger UI that we were used to working with.
So like the result is exactly what you want and
Yes.
expect. And there are some steps to make this foolproof. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
And maybe some steps to make in the Azure Functions way of working, because in some cases also the implementation of the HTTP calls there feels less clean than the MVC one we're used to.
Yeah, true.
But like, I definitely see future here.
I do as well. And then you can see on the screen that it says on the get beta talks, gets all the beta talks. That's actually the description that we put into that attribute that was above that function. And then of course now the cool thing is that if I do try it out and I click execute, then I get here a list of the 3.
But this is the power of
Yes.
having your specification out, having an application or a library that will create this on the fly, and have an interactive documentation for you.
Yeah,
because
true.
This is all we actually need. You can give me pages, but if there's one of these, I'll go into that.
And you'll play around and you'll know how it works. And then the cool thing is that, for instance, here if we have the one with the ID, then of course I need to first click try it out. And then here it says also a specification that I need to add the ID here. So if I do 4, I'll probably get a not found, or at least I'll get a 2 or 4 in this case, because I haven't implemented not found.
No content.
And if I do this, then I should get the bad request. That's the one where we can't parse the ID. But if we do 2, then we'll get the beta talks about developing Azure Functions. And then
so it works.
Yeah, this is even a newer version of, again, a beta talk on developing Azure Functions.
Cool.
Now this is on specifying an Open API specification while you are developing functions yourself. However, there might also be a scenario in which you already have an Open API specification, but you need to implement the API.
Yeah.
Now there's something very powerful on that one. And the downside is it doesn't work anymore.
Oh.
So I had this extension in Visual Studio Code, but I updated a couple of things, and then now it doesn't want to work on Visual Studio Code anymore. However, there's always a backup. So what we can do, and I'm going to close this one down so that we have a screen.
The interesting part, if you can come from that side, you only make the definition, and if it implements it, then the double code is not your problem anymore, unless you start changing things. But
yes, because then you need to keep JSON and a implementation in sync, and now you are keeping an implementation and the attributes above in sync. And I think I like that one better since they're closer together, just like you said.
But it's like it's a nice scaffolding way of if you really think out your API or you get it like this is, you have to make this work like this because you need to replace that part of the application, or it's just really designed like that.
Yeah.
Like okay, let's bake it out and start implementing.
And let's show how awesome that can be. So I'm going to open this folder in Visual Studio Code, and as you can see, the only thing I have in this BT00 folder is a API.json specification. And then this is about the pet store, and you can have list all pets, and there's a lot of information available here, but we don't have an implementation yet. So what we're going to do, and normally, again, this would be done through an extension on Azure Functions, but it doesn't want to do that right now. So we're going into command line, because we can always use command line, right? And then they have this tool they call AutoRest. And AutoRest is actually a tool that generates code based on an API specification. And they support a multitude of languages currently, and C# is one of them. So what we could do, and I prepared this a little bit, is I can call AutoRest to say I would like to create Azure Functions in C#.
Yeah.
My input file is the API.json, that's right here, that we just saw in Visual Studio Code. My output folder will be generated AZ Functions, and I think that's actually a bit long, so let's say We'll do beta talk functions, for instance. So BT functions.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a specific version, and I'm going to have the namespace be beta talks. And as you can see, I'm changing it right now so that at least we see that there's something new in there. So I'm going to automatically create REST endpoints in a Azure Functions C# version based on that API.json file. Now AutoRest will inspect that API.json file and will start generating all kinds of stuff. In this case, apparently there's a few warnings about being undefined types here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But now we have this BT functions folder, and we actually have a C# project for our Azure Functions. We have models where we have the error model and the pet model, but also, and then here's the most power I think, we have pets API.cs right here. And let me first real quick do a .NET restore to get rid of all those red squiggly lines. I need to be in the BT functions folder, right? And then .NET restore that.
Mm-hmm.
So it will now pull down all of the NuGet packages it needs to be able to implement this. So the red squiggly lines should go away any second. And then here you can see I have a pets API that gets an iLogger. That's the constructor. And then I have a list pets async where it says I'm going to implement or I'm going to log this information, and then I have a not implemented. But it already has the correct route. It has the correct verb. It has, in this case, anonymous authorization.
Mm-hmm.
And it also has create pets async with the right information in there. And
And also this gives you a proper style to continue on, because I can imagine if you're used to doing this a bit different, then this is really opinionated.
Yes.
But there's nothing wrong being opinionated, because you can build quick and have at least agreement on how to do things.
Yep.
So this could really work for a team having to build stuff like this.
Yeah, and I think so too. So what I think we're seeing is that also in the interest of Open API Specification, Functions is starting to mature.
Yeah.
They now have a preview Open API Specification generation based off of your functions, but also generating functions based on the Open API Specification. So we're getting more and more into building complete APIs using functions.
Cool. And did you? I don't know if you tried it out, because in this case it's really open because it's all anonymous, and as I can see that. Did you check out some of the security options? Because I'm curious, what will it do? Because the authorization level on calling a function isn't supposed to be used as security. You can keep stuff internal with that. Yep. But are there any? Is there any opinion in there for doing that? Or?
I'm not entirely sure. I haven't looked into it that far. So there is a lot of information about AutoRest, which is actually also a tool Microsoft developed themselves for, I think, specifically this use case. I haven't looked at authorization yet. However, I can imagine that having easy auth on top of your API would automatically fix that problem for you.
Yeah, indeed. Cool. But it looks amazing, indeed. It's just all you have to do is implement where there's to do now.
Yeah, where it says not implemented, and then you're done.
Cool. Really cool.
So that's it for now.
Thank you for this, Rick.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for watching.
See you next time.
Bye.